Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. If you're feeling charitable, please smash the subscribe button and the like button, and please follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Welcome to Big Mouth, and welcome to this video, Zack Snyder's Justice League Explained. So we should start at the very beginning, because I know many of you know all about this, so this could be all very boring for you. But in celebration of the announcement of Zack Snyder's Justice League being streamed next year on HBO Max, I thought it'd be quite fun to actually start at the very beginning, and for people who are following me or maybe just discovering the channel, understanding what all the fuss is about. So as I say, let's start at the very beginning. Zack Snyder is a director. He directed the Watchmen adaptation, 300, and a couple of other movies as well. So he's very well known for being a director with his own unique vision. So in 2013, he was brought on by Christopher Nolan to direct a brand new Superman film, Man of Steel. This was a film that would be written by David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan himself. Chris and David were the ones who constructed and wrote the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. So Christopher Nolan was not just penning this, co-penning this with David Goyer, he was also an executive producer. Snyder was a very controversial choice because a lot of fans of the Watchmen graphic novel did not like the Watchmen movie. I know, I love it, but a lot of people don't. He's a very controversial filmmaker, and there already was a lot of dislike for this man. I think it's unfair dislike. So this was a very controversial choice. The last Superman film that we had was Bryan Singer's Superman Returns, which only made $400 million at the global box office and was deemed and classed as a failure. Man of Steel, as I said, was written. The story was written by David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan, but mostly the script and the ideas were from David Goyer. Now, Man of Steel was a visual delight. It looked like how a superhero, a Superman movie should look. It had really deep cuts, really deep character development. It was very different to Richard Donner's Superman, and certainly extremely different to Bryan Singer's Superman Returns. Zack Snyder doesn't seem to have much love for Donner's Superman or Singer's Superman, and he sees Superman in maybe not a darker way, but more in a realistic way. So that was very controversial because a lot of Superman fans and DC fans feel that these are fantasy characters and you shouldn't really put them in the real world. I think it's great to see different visions and different ideas for these characters. I loved Man of Steel. I think it was a great film. But a very controversial thing happened near the end of Man of Steel. The villain in this movie was called General Zod, and Superman had no choice within the story but to snap Zod's neck. This was very, very controversial because one of Superman's first rules is he doesn't kill. He has a no-kill policy. So a very controversial decision, a decision that was blamed on Zack Snyder. I can tell you here right now and right today that this was never Zack Snyder's choice. This was totally David Goyer's decision and idea. Christopher Nolan had issues accepting it. I don't know about Snyder. I kind of suspect this was in the kind of avenue that Snyder liked to do. It was certainly beautifully and really compellingly directed. It looked really gripping and shocking. And I remember being in the cinema and everyone's breath, all the oxygen and air in the cinema was sucked up. We couldn't believe what we'd seen, but it was amazing and it was shocking, but it upset a hell of a lot of people. Man of Steel made $668 million globally at the box office. It was deemed to be a success, but obviously Warner Brothers felt that this film should have been closer to $1 billion. They feel modern day superhero movies, especially Superman, should be going towards that ballpark. So for them, they were a little bit disappointed. I loved the film. Very quickly at Comic-Con, it was announced that a Batman v Superman movie would happen. Again, directed by Zack Snyder, written by Chris Terrio, and David Goyer was back again. Zack would have more of a kind of creative hand with this, within the story, with David S. Goyer and Chris Terrio, who had worked with Ben Affleck, who was another controversial situation, was that Ben Affleck was cast as Batman Bruce Wayne. This didn't go down well with many people. I was surprised, but I wanted to see how it would turn out, and it turned out that Ben Affleck was a great Bruce Wayne and a great Batman. But Batman v Superman was promoted as this, big fight between these two superheroes, and not the film we actually saw. The film we actually saw was very dark, very deep, very big commentary, a deconstruction of both characters. The characters will be reconstructed and rise up at the end of the film. Many people, just like Man of Steel, were not happy with this. But the toxicity, the aggression, and the divisive nature of the reaction of this film was like nothing I saw before. And Zack Snyder was totally blamed for this. Again, I love Batman v Superman. When I saw it, I thought this had multiple Oscar wins name on it. I really did believe that. You're laughing right now. But when I saw this movie, I thought the critics were going to love it. The critics hated it. One of the big problems was that the theatrical cut of Batman v Superman was not edited by Zack Snyder, but by the studio, because they were afraid what people would think, so they cut a lot of stuff. It had a great opening, historically one of the great opening box offices of all time for Warner Brothers, but slowly it had one of the biggest drop-offs in history, and the situation just got from bad to worse. So Warner Brothers had decided to allow Zack Snyder to edit together his vision for Batman v Superman. This was labelled Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Edition. This was a 3-hour movie instead of a 2.5 movie, and it made a hell of a lot more sense to a hell of a lot of people. But the people who didn't like it still didn't like it, but at least conceded it was a better version than the theatrical cut. And I think this is important because Zack Snyder was in charge of the whole universe. The next film was Suicide Squad. Again, this film was panned, but made just under $800 million globally. A great global box office. The soundtrack won an Oscar. The costumes, I think, won an Oscar as well. I can't remember. But basically, the film made money, but critics hated it and called it a mess. Again, Warner Brothers edited this film, and the director, David Ayer, didn't. And they cut so many moments out of this film that would have made it a better movie, including Jared Leto's Joker. Jared Leto was not happy, publicly stating how betrayed he felt, and by the studio. So again, we had another film that they released an extended edition, but the extended footage in this film was about 10 minutes. A little bit more Joker and Harley, but not David Ayer's complete vision. He's been on social media for the past 6 months, and he's pushing for his movie to be seen, and we're trying to win that game as well. So that was part of Zack Snyder's DCEU. Then Wonder Woman went through a lot of changes. The original Wonder Woman movie, directed by Patty Jenkins, was going to have a Batman crossover instead. We had the logo. She was emailing him at the end there and stuff like that. He sent her the picture. But we didn't get the Wonder Woman that Zack Snyder wanted us to have. There's no question about that. But it's a great movie. It worked. People felt it was better than Batman v Superman. I'm not going to say that, but it's a really good film. So all of a sudden, the mainstream media and audience were happy about the DCEU. Wonder Woman got everyone on the team. We were all very excited. And then Zack Snyder was to direct and co-write a Justice League movie. And so basically we were going to see Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg, Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman all together. This was the culmination of Snyder's vision, beginning from Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. And all of a sudden, I think a few months earlier, or maybe a year earlier, I can't remember the dates, but his daughter, Autumn, had taken her own life tragically. Now, the official statement was that Zack, literally, he finished principal photography on Justice League. He shot mostly everything he wanted for the picture. And so the official statement was that Zack Snyder needed to step away because his wife, Deborah, is his partner with him, with his films and stuff. They decided, well, the official word was they could not carry on with Justice League. So this was the official kind of word from Warner Brothers that Zack got his so-called friend, Joss Whedon, to finish off the movie. There wasn't much to finish off. Editing, maybe a couple of reshoots, not very much. So everyone was excited because Joss Whedon made a brilliant Avengers movie, Buffy, Angel, great TV shows, pioneering. We all had a lot of faith in Whedon back then, and we just thought he was being a friend, and he'd literally just, garnish the film, and it would be fine. So we all went to see this film, and it was pretty obvious that Justice League, this was not, the theatrical version of Justice League was not Zack Snyder's film. In fact, we would later find out that most of the film was reshot by Whedon, and the then CEO, president of Warner Brothers, Kevin Sugihara, actually wanted to change the way the DCEU was seen. He wanted more of a Marvel cinematic universe, funny, bright colours, things like that, and that's what he wanted Whedon to do. In exchange, Whedon would get his own Batgirl movie, which he could do whatever he wanted with. If Justice League was a success, he would be in charge of the entire DCEU. So we were lied to. Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder were not friends. It was not Zack's idea to bring Whedon on. Whedon was brought on to replace Snyder because they weren't happy with the darker tone of Snyder's vision, and they got him to rewrite the Justice League script. And ultimately, we just recently found out yesterday that they wanted Snyder to put together a 2-hour movie. He did a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. Sugihara still wasn't happy, and we don't know if the real reason was because Autumn took her own life, or if it was, creative differences. I'm going to go with creative differences, but who knows what happened there. I have no right to talk about somebody's daughter dying and whether they, rightly walked off the project because of that reason, but we don't know. Anyway, our hearts broke because we went to see Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we saw Joss Whedon's Justice League. The problem for Joss Whedon, of course, was he was told by Sugihara, I want a 2-hour movie, but I want it released at the same time Snyder's movie was going to be released. So Joss didn't have long to reframe this film. The visual effects were terrible because they didn't have time to refine them. So the film flopped. The film made, 500 or 600 million or whatever it made, right? It was a flop. This film should have been making $2 billion. I think Zack Snyder's Justice League would have made just under $1 billion. So probably would have been deemed to be a little bit of a success, but still I think Warner Brothers wouldn't have been happy with that. But I think that we would have got a bigger win from Zack Snyder's Justice League than Joss Whedon's Justice League. So this is what happened up to then. Then all hell broke loose with the fans because we went to see Zack Snyder's Justice League and we saw something that just wasn't a very good film. Whether you like Avengers, whether you don't think Zack Snyder's right to be running the DCEU or not and making these films, the truth of the matter is Joss Whedon's Justice League wasn't a good film. It was rushed. It was a Frankenstein's monster. And we paid for something that we didn't want to pay for. We didn't go there to see that. And Warner Brothers framed it as a Zack Snyder film. This was Zack Snyder's vision, but Joss Whedon was just, refining some of the elements of the film, and that was it. That was a lie. That was not true. So basically, as I said before, we went to drink Coca-Cola and we tasted vinegar. So all of a sudden, the fan campaign to release the Snyder Cut began. We started to find out some very disturbing facts. A young woman called Fiona started to come out and say that she knew certain things. She knew that Zack Snyder's version of Justice League existed. And it was ready to go, and they didn't allow him to release it. It's a totally different film from Joss Whedon. So then a big petition started. A petition, I think, that had 100,000 signatures, but there was controversy with this petition because it was alleged that a lot of these signatures were fake. So that kind of died a death. But then the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag was reborn, and the fans would hashtag it all the time. And there were people doing YouTube videos, people like Davey Pina, Chris Wong Svensson, John Aaron Garza, lots of characters out there who loved Zack, loved his DC films, loved Watchmen, and were just so heartbroken they didn't get, that kind of part of the story we were waiting for. Originally, there was at least two Justice League movies planned, but Zack's been talking about three. And all that was binned, and they decided just to do this Justice League movie, and then they drove poor Zack off the project. So what happened was Fiona was telling us a lot of things at the time. Zack was very quiet in the early days, didn't say very much. I always assumed that Fiona was Zack's foot soldier and she was doing the talking for him. It was a genius move. She did get a lot of hate, but a lot of us believed her. And, well, I think the thing is, we wanted to believe her. That was the important thing. But it was really like an episode of The X-Files. There was rumours, there was whispers. Fiona was saying this and that. I think up to a point, Fiona was doing a good job, but ultimately she was very inexperienced with media. I think she's a nurse or whatever she is, right? She had no experience of the public, fans. This is a very fiery, toxic place to be. And I think what happened up to a point was then Zack got involved. Vero rose and he got an account on Vero. He understood that he couldn't do this. He couldn't run a campaign through Twitter. He was getting a lot of hate. There was rumours before she took her own life that his daughter Autumn was also trolled from people who didn't like him and his movie on Facebook. I don't know how true that is. They're just allegations I can't back up, by the way. So we're going to say allegedly. And so Zack started with Vero. He started to talk to the fans. He started to post like teases and things like that. Posters and pictures from the film, his film, but we never saw them in Whedon's film. All of a sudden, we were finding out that Steppenwolf was going to look totally different, right? A more scarier Steppenwolf, an effective villain. Basically, the Justice League movie by Joss Whedon had Steppenwolf as the main villain. But we quickly found out from Zack Snyder, through pictures and other ways and actors coming forward that were on his Justice League but were removed from Whedon's Justice League. People like the guy who was going to play Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. That's right. We were going to get a proper Green Lantern for quite a few scenes in Zack Snyder's Justice League. But in Joss Whedon's Justice League, we see a lantern via CGI quickly go past, swing a green thing, and that was it. Whedon's film wasn't about celebrating the DC universe, and quite clearly Snyder's was. A lot of DC fans don't accept that Snyder is a big DC fan. He loves DC, and he has his visuals are the way you should see a comic book adaptation in live action. They're so stunning, and they're so beautiful, as you can see behind me, apart from this bit, because that's Whedon. It was Zack quickly said that he never saw the theatrical release of Justice League. It's saying Dick Donner said about Lester's Superman 2. He couldn't bring himself to watch it, but he did hear a lot of things. We asked him about a Russian family, a girl, and he said, what Russian family? What Russian girl? It was very obvious to see that the movie we saw wasn't Zack's film at all. Now, obviously, elements of the story with Steppenwolf, blah-de-blah-de-blah, were the same narratives as his Justice League, but it's a very, very different film. The more information we got, the more hyped up we were, the more times we kind of hashtag released a Snyder Cut. But then the fandom, the movement started to turn against each other. One day, John Aaron Garza decided, and he's a Snyder fan, basically, you probably know who he is, and if you're new to all this, you're going to know very quickly, right? So John Aaron Garza made a very big statement that for the Snyder Cut to be completed, it would take $40 million. Now, ironically, a lot of us didn't believe this. Now, I didn't go aggressively against John for this. I just found it hard to believe because Zack at that time was telling us that everything was completed. But that isn't exactly true. Zack was a bit mischievous there just to get the hype up because he has got things to finish off. Let's be honest about that. But Zack had to do whatever he had to do to get this movement going. He was our general and we were his foot soldiers. And he did it. He did it by this genius. I have no issue with Zack Snyder for doing that. So everyone was really upset with, or a lot of people were upset with John Aaron Garza for claiming that it needed 40 million to be completed. As I say, John Aaron Garza was right. I'm sorry, John. You were right. We were wrong, but I never aggressively attacked you. I said on my videos, I agree to disagree, but I was wrong. You were right, and that's fine. That's fine. So this split up the fandom. Then what happened was a Twitter account and a site called RT Snyder Cut appeared from nowhere. They claimed in their bio that they were part of the movement, but they wanted to get us together to be positive, to fight for Zack's vision of Justice League. So they started to organise events, successful events that would trend. All of a sudden, we had companies like Subway involved, hashtagging release the Snyder Cut, big events. Then November the 17th, 2019, the 2-year anniversary of the release of the theatrical cut, we were told by people like Grace Randolph and very important figures, it was very important we hashtagged. It was a very successful trending event for that anniversary. So we had Ray Fisher, Cyborg, we had Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot all hashtagging release the Snyder Cut. It was a success. Now, as we know now, and we guessed back then what we didn't know, that's when Warner Brothers started following Zack Snyder on social media again. They'd already started talking, and all of a sudden, Zack had a phone call, and a phone call from the man who didn't really believe in his vision, which was amazing. Now, months before this, Kevin Sujihara, who we can all blame for this absolute clusterfuck, was removed for giving someone he used to sleep with work. But the truth was, he was removed for the calamity from the DCEU. Because Warner Brothers and their shareholders quickly realised that all the decisions he made brought them to this and made everything a disaster, right? So Toby Emmerich was part of his team, and he was part of removing Zack Snyder. But it was Toby Emmerich who rang Zack up in November and said, is it possible for you to put your cut together so we can see it? So that was very big of Toby. I have respect for Toby. Someone who had something to do with his removal said, you know what? I was wrong. You know, people do believe in you. Maybe not everyone, but a hell of a lot of people believe in you and your vision. We want you to do this. So a fan campaign turned everything around. But make no mistake, Zack Snyder, the man we're talking about, constructed this whole thing. Genius. We were his foot soldiers. He manipulated the whole situation. He knows how to work this entertainment system, and he did it. He and his good wife are dons, right? So they're brilliant. In other words, they're brilliant. And we're getting this film now. After all the campaigning, the happy ending is that Zack Snyder's Justice League will be streaming sometime in 2021 on HBO Max, either in episodes or as a 4-hour film. So, for the first time in history in the entertainment industry, they've actually listened to the consumer. Now, us, the members of this movement, have been accused of bullying, being terrorists, being gangsters, you name it. We've been called it. We also were fundraising for a cause that's very close, of course, to Zack and Debbie's heart, which is suicide prevention. Hundreds of thousands of dollars raised by us, apparent bullies and toxic people. So why do people in the industry, comic book writers, elite journalists think we're toxic? Because we're the audience, and they believe we are not elite. We don't hold any power, but we do. Because, as I've said many times, we are the customer. Without us, you may as well just be writing fan fiction and filming it from your homes. Without us, you have absolutely nothing. And this has been proven. This is a groundbreaking moment. Even Warner Media in their statement said this is all because of us. So this is the story of the Snyder Cut. And as I say, it's reached a really, really happy ending. And we are going to see this film, a film that started off with so much tragedy, betrayal, backstabbing, typical Hollywood. Now Zack Snyder could potentially be running the DCEU, Warner Max part of the DCEU franchise. And I think that streaming is so much better for Zack because there's a freedom, an artistic freedom there. With cinemas and the theatrical thing, box offices have to be reached. And I think the problem is with a lot of pundits, IGN made a very interesting comment. You know, if you have to release a 4-hour cut of your movie, that means your movie's not very good. The Ten Commandments was 5 hours, right? Titanic was 3 hours. Jesus Christ, JFK, Oliver Stone, over 3 hours. Yeah, that's just crap, right? But IGN are part of the problem. They like films that are compressed in a can and they're all the same, right? And this is the problem with movie journalism right now. This is what really drove Zack off the DCEU. But now we're in a better position where Zack Snyder can develop DCEU movies for HBO Max, right? And then they can do whatever they want on the other side, as I keep on saying. This has become a very interesting situation. Where will Cavill's Superman be? Will he still be the theatrical Superman, or will J.J. Abrams cast someone else and he'll be the HBO Max DCEU Superman? You know, the DC universe has got a multiverse, multiple Earths, with different versions of Superman and the Flash. And we know we're getting a Flashpoint movie. That could be interesting as well. So there's a lot of things going on. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Must be all the haters pouring salt with all their bitterness. But basically, we are in a very, very interesting situation where Zack Snyder has got the keys to the kingdom again. As I said before, this is the George Lucas of the modern era. George Lucas wasn't a contemporary filmmaker. Star Wars was very risky when he first did Star Wars. Nobody believed in it. And, you know, us the fans believe in Zack because we've seen 2 of his DCEU movies. It's an amazing victory, and now we get to feast on it. Don't react to people calling us, you know, toxic and trolls. We're not. Some of us are a bit too aggressive, and I think now that can calm down. Can't it, please? For example, the Harley Quinn animated series, when they had a Snyder Cut fan and did this whole toxic thing, right? They wanted to bait us by doing that. They wanted us to react toxically, and we didn't. We took that animated T-shirt, we made it and we sold it to raise funds for suicide prevention. They were dumbfounded. It wasn't us who looked stupid, it was them. And this is what you do when you're smart. There's a lot of smart people involved in this movement. So I'm going to actually go and watch Man of Steel and Batman v Superman now. And I hope you enjoyed my interpretation of explaining the Snyder Cut to everyone, maybe people who have experienced it, people who don't know about it. Obviously, for me and my channel, this is the big build-up to the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League in 2021. There's going to be a lot of videos every day, throughout the days and weeks. This is going to be the Snyder Cut channel mostly, but don't forget, I talk about all forms of entertainment when there's something to talk about and something that interests me. So why don't you subscribe? Why don't you like? And most importantly of all, let's talk. Comment down below. And I'll see you again for more Snyder Cut videos. Isn't this a fun time?